Greetings and welcome to Star Trek Discovery Pod, a sometimes funny, trying to be smart podcast covering all things new and classic Trek. Accept my flappity fisticuffs, you foul fiend. I'm your captain, Myrriah Gossett. With me on the view screen, we have
Clyde Haynes. When I die, I wonder if they'll name a planet after me.
I guess if we infuse you into the molecules of the planet, we can
That'll
maybe
work.
make that happen. Paul is on a away mission. We will be joining back together the full crew to discuss the entirety of this season to make sure you have our hottest of frakes and our freshest of takes. And we are going to be discussing the finale to season 4 of Star Trek Lower Decks. Old Friends, New Planets. This was written by Mae Darman and directed by Bob Suarez. Fun fact, Mae was Mike McMahon's assistant prior to starting to write for the show. And prior to that, she was the assistant to Alex Kurtzman on Star Trek Discovery. So she is definitely a part of the Trek fam. Just a couple of housekeeping notes before we jump into discussions for the evening. You can subscribe, rate, and review on Apple and Spotify and YouTube. You can share the show with your friends. We really love that. You can also leave us a review. Tell us what you think of the show at StarTrekPod.co to find links to all of those things. And if you would like to join us on our Patreon for just $2 an episode, you can hang out with us on our Slack. There's watch alongs going on. I also have a special thing for our patrons this week. We did ask Paul for some kind of video for coverage for this week. I think he was a little tired when I made the ask because I said, oh, just send us a reaction video. And instead, Paul filmed himself watching the entirety of the finale. And so it's a half an hour. I was trying to be like, oh, I'll play a clip of Paul during tonight's podcast. But I don't know if we want to just sit and watch Paul for 30 minutes, but I think our patrons would. So you can watch along with Paul in real time. I'll put up the video. I think you all are really going to love it.
I think what we should do is we should do a watch along. So what we can do is we can all watch along as Paul watches along the episode. Right. And so
yeah, we all
like
three play. We play Paul watching. Yeah, because he also didn't wear his headphones, so you can hear the audio. So you can.
Oh man, it's gonna be great. And just see like, why is he eating that potato chip? I like the one on the right. He's got a whole bag of Cheetos over there, but yet he's on these Lays. Like I disagree with that. Like what was he thinking?
Snacks, facial reactions. Yeah, we can all have a good time watching Paul. Clyde, if people are watching us live tonight, there are ways to also interact with us. How can they do that?
I mean, a Telegram is typically the best way to do it. So call your Western Union guy. Please, if you're watching us live in the chat, just type capital P, capital O, capital D, capital pod in your chat, and we'll take a look at your comment, your question, your musing, your random notes. We just ask that you keep it civil, get along. We like our listeners. And then when the time comes, if you have that special recap moment, you want to give us your overall thought on the finale of season 4, then just type capital H, capital F, capital HF in the chat. You'll know why I said HF here in a moment. And then we'll get to know your show, your thoughts on the show.
Indeed. And another bonus thing, if you are one of our patrons and you maybe can't join us for the live, but you want to give us your thoughts, give us your opinions on these episodes, you can do so in our Patreon Slack. We have messages from the menagerie, which I think you know what time it is. Hot freaks! Hot freaks! It is time for some hot breaks. Let's check out what the messages from the menagerie have to say. Clyde, you want to take the first one?
Sure. Karen says, please, no more Twain. But the rest of the episode was great. The recreation of the Wrath of Khan Nebula fight scene with accompanying music was great. You have to laugh when Locarno complains about the Ferengi having a paywall on the bomb. Could not agree more. I thought that was hilarious and on brand. So
very on brand. Mag says, I second no more Twain, followed by Karen, who says, okay, that was just so good and so solid. I feel like maybe we are graduating into a full-fledged regular Star Trek series with a streak of fun. What a packed episode, lots of plot, lots of changes, and lots of good one-liners. I honestly couldn't stop laughing when I finally caught Accept My Flappity Fisticuffs, You Foul Friend. The music at the end with Tendi determinately marching off says to me season 5 is going to be a banger. Yeah, I feel like I'm on the pulse with all of these views. But Clyde, what's your hot freak of this episode?
So my hot freak, and I want to say Leslie says, what a great episode. I find that for someone who eschews promotion, Mariner shows the markings of a great leader, which is kind of in line with my hot freak is, we've given Mariner so much grief about her just on again, off again, self-sabotage. But her leadership in this episode, and like we've seen it throughout the season in bits and pieces, but this episode, I thought, wow, like she's really stepped it up.
Yeah.
Overall, I thought this was a really good episode, from beginning to end, really. And I have to say, I loved the beginning because they've done what every Star Trek series I feel like has to do at some point, and that is take us to the Academy.
Yes.
And so they took us back to the Academy and were able to recreate the Nova Squadron conversation and actually added to canon and gave us some behind the scenes of the kind of conversation that happens, and then tossed in Mariner for good measure. Like I was really impressed with that.
Yeah, I agree. I feel like watching this season, I mean, every season of Lower Decks, I've enjoyed more and more, but this episode in particular, to me, I feel like my hottest of freak is like they tell so much story in such a short amount of time that it's truly so impressive. And like the amount of jokes that they also get to fit in feels so earned because of the amount of plot that they also manage to fit in, that it truly just like firing on all cylinders. So like hats off to the writers room of this season because they really really killed it for me. We have a couple other hot freaks here going on in the chat. We have Nicole who says, Pod, I think my favorite part was Tendi at the end. She's going to do something badass. Agreed. I think this is a great season for Tendi, and I'm excited to see where she goes next season. And Takako says, hot freak, he looks like Tom Paris. That exchange between
I don't
Rutherford
see it.
and Boimler
That was
was,
hilarious.
was
That
so
was
hilarious. We also have Nicole here with hot freak. Watching Boimler be acting captain was awesome, and he did great.
Yes, he did a great job.
He did do a great
Yeah.
job. Yeah, I think everyone's really just like all of the character arcs felt really satisfying this episode. I really have I don't know if you got a chance to watch the Ready Room. We haven't had a Ready Room for most of this season, but they did give us one here at the end, and it's with Don Lewis and Jerry O'Connell. So it was just like a really fun chat. But they were kind of talking about, they did a bit of a retrospective on Captain Freeman and how now that she's kind of put Ransom in charge of Mariner's ascension into herself, it has allowed Captain Freeman to not have to really worry about taking care of her daughter in a career way, and instead focused on herself and being a good captain and being a good mom. And I think we've really seen that this season from Freeman, and how she's had more room. Like they did all the callbacks of her talking about how incredible she was at the academy. It was like, oh, I still hold the record for this, and I studied this, and all these different points for her that really shined all season as well. And also, I just love Don Lewis, so I really have enjoyed watching her character this season.
I agree. I'm a big Don Lewis fan from way, 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 way back. And oddly enough, I was talking to my daughter tonight, and I have a daughter who's in middle school, and I asked her, I said, "So what are you learning in English?" And she said, "We're talking about symbolism." And I said, "Well, it's funny." She said, we talk about symbolism a lot." And she was like, "Oh." And I was like, "Yeah." I said, when we think about high literature on the podcast that I'm doing tonight, we often talk about symbolism, and we talk about what it means. And when you talk about Captain Freeman, as a parent, it's so interesting because we've seen for 3 seasons she was trying to mold and lead her daughter, right? Like it was really about her going, you got to do this. Like I'm focused on trying to help you grow up. And to your point, she comes to this point where she allows Ransom to focus on her career, and it frees It frees Freeman up
Mhm.
to both be an exceptional captain, which we saw episode after episode when we thought, like, what is she doing?
Mhm.
She knew something that we all didn't. And then it's allowed her to be a mom, right?
Mhm.
Just a mom. And I think that's amazing. And it's a lesson. There's a lesson in it for all of us parents. Like, hey, at some point you got to let go and you got to choose, are you going to be coach or are
Mm.
you going to be dad? And so, yeah.
Yeah, I'm sure. Yeah, it'll be interesting to see. I think now that Mariners kind of had this more full circle moment, and I think to me, what was interesting was essentially we got to see Nick Locarno. To me, is like what would happen to Mariner if she fully didn't let herself
Mm.
heal, right? And I think that is the lesson of Nick Locarno in this particular instance. I was a little sad we didn't.
Symbolism. If I could just get my daughter to listen to the pod thing,
She knows so much.
she knows so much.
Um, she'll get there. In like 10 years, she'll be like, Dad, you made a good point. um,
She'll say a lot of things, but Dad made a good point. I don't think it's one of those
will
she'll
never be
say.
one of them.
She'll be like, "You're so corny."
But I was a little sad we didn't get a full redemption arc for Lacarna, but I wonder if potentially because of the planet reforming, if there's going to be something maybe in the future that could happen for the character. But it was also interesting to see that the consequence though of not healing is fully destruction. So they really like push that, I think.
Yeah, I also think that this was, like I mentioned, I think last week, I had read this article that the reason why they got rid of Locarno but brought Tom Paris in
Mhm.
was they just felt like Locarno was not
Unredeemable,
redeemable,
right, right.
right? And that was on brand. Like
Mhm.
that, like I felt like we kept looking for this moment where he would be redeemed, like
And so
he'd
is
do the
Mariner,
right
I
thing.
think.
Exactly. And when you take a step back and look at it, or on a second watch, you go, no, like he consistently. So what we've seen is through TNG and now through Lower Decks, like they've stayed consistent to this character. He is a bad guy. And
Mhm.
so if you go back, and we probably talk about this next week when we look at the we do kind of the full season recap. If you step back and you were to ask, okay, who was the big bad of season 4, right? The
Mhm.
answer is Locarno, which is a weird
Mhm.
statement to say. It's like, really? You kept looking for him to be redeemed. He goes, no, he was the big bad from day one, right? And at the end, what happened to him is what you kind of expect to happen to a big bad. He was destroyed.
Mhm. Yeah, he did meet the full demise. Um, yeah, I think the other thing the comparison that can be drawn, especially because they essentially do a full play-by-play of the Kirk Khan in the Nebula battle, right?
Mhm.
Is that we now get to see Mariner. She was fully the captain of the ship. She was piloting the ship. She was negotiating diplomatically with all of these other lower deckers and essentially being like, I get it. I am also one of you and I know enough about your culture to try to poke the bear a little bit in
Mhm.
these specific places to make you realize that this isn't a good guy. And so to me, it was really satisfying to watch Mariner not only finish her emotional arc, but then regain her confidence and fully like I feel like we fully saw Mariner at her full Mariner self.
I I completely agree. And I think Locarno's interesting because the thing that's interesting about Locarno that reminds me a little bit about Khan is
It's
he's not your typical bad guy, right? In that so many times, and even in Star Trek, your bad guy looks like a bad guy,
mhm.
right? He is, and I'm just gonna say it, he's ugly in some way,
Right.
right?
They
He
gave
is
him
an
bags under his
alien.
eyes. Oh,
He-
for
yeah,
Lacarna, yeah.
yeah. Well, just and just saying in general, he's ugly in some way. But Locarno, much like Khan, looks like you would expect a superstar Starfleet officer to kind of look, right? Now he's got a little, I'm worn a little bit, but but if you thought about the poster child for a Star Trek superstar,
Mm-hmm.
Locarno's in that mold. Like he looks like Riker. He looks like
Tom Paris.
Kirk. Yeah, he looks like Tom Paris. Like he looks like these guys that you would expect to be the star,
Mm-hmm.
right? And yet here he is. He's on the other side of the fence.
Yeah, that's an interesting point because, like, I think we, to your point, Clyde, we expect our big bads to look a very particular way. Although I think we've moved a little past that in like Discovery. I think there is some interesting concepts with the idea that like a villain doesn't always have to look like a villain, and that can sometimes make them harder to spot. So that is very interesting.
But don't we always guess who the villain is? Like we have a whole dialogue where like that guy is sus, she is sus, right? Like
right.
even when they're not sus, like we just knew Vance was the bad guy for a long time.
He did. It's like too suave. It's like if you're too suave, it's like something's too slick about this situation.
It'd be interesting. Now I feel like we go back and be like, nah, he's not sus, but he sure is handsome.
Yeah, I know. I was thinking, and maybe listeners, you can chime in and let us know in prep for, our final season of Discovery. I was trying to think of what we were going to do kind of in our downtime. Because as of right now, the next Trek series, the date they gave is early 2024. So we have a couple months. And so I was thinking we should do a full rewatch of the entire series from start to finish. So you all let us know what you think about that. I wanted to talk a little bit more about Tendi because I feel like she also had one of the larger season arcs. And it was really satisfying seeing her, one, step up to her sister, but also have the confidence to know that she can step away from Starfleet, but it will always still be there. Also, the Miglimo battle was just like iconically silly, and I really loved it.
I mean, it was. Felt like a little Rob. Like she fell on him.
I know. I was like,
but
is
he
really
what he
defeated?
yeah, like he's there. She's out. He's
Right.
still,
He's moving his little flappy flaps.
yes.
He's trying.
I mean, and I'm a Tendi fan. I mean, I would definitely watch like a short limited series called Mistress of the Winter Solstice. I'd watch that.
I
Like,
really hope they do a
sign
comic.
me up.
I feel like that would be a really great comic book if we could see a full Tendi as Mistress of the Winter Soldier. But that would really make me really happy. The other thing, where else did I want to go? I mean, there was a lot of I thought good payoffs this episode too, of things that felt like throwaways, like the Genesis device, in that cold open finally came back. Like you were saying, Clyde, the paywall moment made me literally laugh out loud. I also like Mariner's like, oh, a Ferengi weapon voiced by a Ferengi. Unexpected, but I like it.
That was, for me, that's what Lower Decks is all about, right? That is the very subtle, kind of sarcastic humor that is self-reflective on itself, right? Like that is what that to me is what I love most about Lower Decks, is even if you didn't catch it. So even if you weren't thinking, it is weird that we always have these bombs and the voice is always like Michelle Barrett. Right? It's like, oh, we have a Klingon bomb, but the it's just a deeper Michelle Barrett. So that, like, that comment was just somebody going, hey, we can acknowledge that this was off, and here's how we're going to rectify it. And I love those moments, because it's like, I don't want to say you don't take yourself too seriously, but you're not, you don't look at this and go, well, everything about Star Trek is perfect.
Right.
Right? Like, we make no mistakes. It's all purposeful.
Yeah, I saw a review today that said something like one of the reasons that Lower Decks I think really shines is that it never punches down on Trek. It's always punching up, right? It's always like, how can we take something that all the fans are aware of and we all make fun of and kind of poke at, and then they actually make the jokes around it. And so I think they do a really excellent job of towing that line. I also think it's interesting, and I know, and I hope it's not true. There's rumors that next season might be the last season of Lower Decks. I would love to see it continue in whatever capacity Mike McMahon wants it to, because I think he's doing a phenomenal job as the showrunner. But each season we've kind of gotten an arc where the finale really crescendos for one of our main core characters, right? Like we saw Rutherford, who is like died and come back because he saved everyone from the Badgie situation and all of those things. We've had Boimler kind of have his moment. We've now had Mariner. And I feel like we've now set up, I feel like, for a Tendi kind of big crescendo next season. And then that leaves us, and my hope is, because we've now added T'Lyn, so I'm like, oh, are we just going to keep adding characters so we can continue this cycle? T'Lyn to me has been such a great breakout addition this season. I really love the dry humor. I think Gabrielle Ruiz does an incredible job voicing her. I also really just like her as an actress. And the T'Lyn Cerritos Strong moment was hysterical. And then the fact that she's the one who is like, I have a potential solution, and brings us back to the Twains, which is very divisive, apparently, in the chat. Lots of people not into the Twains. What are your thoughts on the Twains?
It doesn't bother me. I mean, and I think it doesn't bother me is because being on a steamboat in New Orleans with Mark Twain is just so TNG, right?
Yeah.
It makes absolutely no sense, but it's so on brand that it does not bother me at all. And they do a good job of not giving me an overdose of it, right? Like the first time they did it, I was like, okay, this is going on long enough that it's funny, but be careful. This was just short enough that I wasn't bothered by it. I was just like, oh, there we go. I was more entertained by the fact that Freeman's looking like, why the hell does this work?
Yeah.
That I thought was funny.
It's beautiful.
Yes. Yeah, so it's not bothering me. I think it's becoming running gag. To your point about the 5 seasons, I'm a little split, right? Because this is about what I'm used to now. I'm used to a show going about 5 seasons and people going, okay, that's what we needed, right? 5 seasons is, if 5 seasons feels like the 100 episode mark that we used to have for syndication, it's like, great, 5 seasons. Now you're gonna, that's the perfect length for streaming. Let's load you up, put you on Paramount Plus, and now people can rewatch. But it also feels like I've gone back and thought about shows that have gone on for like 13 seasons and asked myself, where did they lose me? And I got to be honest, it's probably around season 5, right? And not for any bad reason, but something else came up. I took a break and didn't return to it, and then eventually maybe I did. And so part of me wants to say I'd love for Lower Decks to be, I don't know, The Simpsons seems like a lot, but one of these shows that goes for 10, 13 seasons, right? 8, 9 seasons. But if we weren't podcasting, my question was, would I fall off? Right? Would I fall off? Especially because it feels like now we're going to have a pretty massive break.
Yeah, I mean, I know they started season 5 already prior to the strike. So I don't know if that's picked back up, because SAG is still technically on strike, and everyone should be supporting SAG as they try to protect themselves from AI. So if you're in Los Angeles or New York, please join a picket line. They could really use some extra bodies out there, because it's waning, because it's been like over 100 and something days. It's really wild. Anyway, but yeah, so I know they've started some production on 5, so it'll be interesting to see where we kind of end up. And to your point, Clyde, I want shows to go for as long as the showrunner feels like they want it to go. You know what I mean? And I feel like I just want him to know, so he can actually end it the way he wants to end it, and not have to retcon something and figure out like a weird alt ending. Because I mean, to your point, like one of my favorite shows of all time, 6 Feet Under, only ran for 5 seasons, and I consider it like one of the most perfectly written television shows of all time. However, I do think of like, I'm probably one of the only other people in the world who still watches like Big Mouth on Netflix. It's such a weird show, but I love how weird it is.
I fell off and I keep trying to go back. So
yeah, and it's like on its 7th season, and I think they're getting one more. And I do agree. It's like, oh, maybe this 7th season could have been the last one, and it would have made sense to me. But I also get, like I want it to feel creatively satisfying. I think that's all I actually care about. Because yeah, to your point, like I fell off of Grey's Anatomy, I think after season 8, whenever they got rid of Christina Yang.
yeah, so I think so. There's something you said that I actually love, right? And that is, I want to. So to me, we can call them showrunners. You can call them whatever you want. To me, they're
Mhm.
storytellers.
Mhm.
And my thing is, and again, you're talking to somebody who believes that everybody should have a job that they love. So, understand that's just my bend. I
Mhm.
feel like showrunners should tell the story that they want to tell as long as they want to tell it and
Mhm.
end it the way they want.
Yep.
And I don't like the over capitalization of everything,
Mm.
because what we do is we say, well, the story is only as viable as people are are watching it, right?
Mhm.
As advertisers are paying for it. And I hate that, right? Like, it's kind of like, I love the idea of self-publishing, because it's like, if you have the ability to tell the stories that you want, as many of them as you want, as long as you want. And if it's an idea of like, if you've got 3 people who are still reading those stories, then those are 3, like, you're writing them because you love the story. You're not writing them so that you have, I hope you're not writing them so that 1 million people read your stories. You're writing them because you have a story to tell. I'd like showrunners and filmmakers to be able to tell their story. And so if that's 6 seasons, if that's
Mm.
16 seasons, and I would hope that the advent of streaming, right, means that you're not worried about when I watch it,
Right.
right? Because the whole thing about it is I can come back and watch it. I think we've mentioned this before, but take Suits, right? What
Mhm.
I've heard is that Suits on Netflix, more people have watched Suits on Netflix than they ever watched in the original run.
Mhm.
Right now, I think I was watching it. I trailed off at season 4. I have every intention of going back and watching more of it. It's just competing with some other things that I'm watching right now.
Yeah.
And so, but I'm hoping that, like, I, I I look at something like this and go, if you've got 10 seasons of stories to tell, especially because we're only talking about 10 episodes,
Right.
tell them. Tell them, right? Like, if you've got it written out that you have this whole arc about Tendi, like, I want to see it. I want to hear
Mhm.
it. Like, I don't know. I'm game for it. Just don't depend on me to watch it week to week, because at some point that just might not be viable.
Yeah, I definitely see your point, and to me that was what was interesting when streaming came about, was the idea that I could pick when I watch it, and that doesn't impact like the possible creativity of the
Hmm.
people making these shows, right? But obviously we've seen that has changed, because now all the streamers have put in commercials because there isn't a way for them to make money otherwise.
Right. And
Um,
here's sorry, I'm gonna get a soapbox for a second.
I know it's very soapboxy right now because it's very hard in entertainment.
Here's what drives me nuts. This is what literally, like, makes me angry, is you want me to pay a subscription fee.
Mhm.
You may even want me to pay an added subscription fee that says no commercials. And then you start the show with a commercial,
Yeah,
right?
like, we technically,
And
so that y'all know, I pay, or, like, we pay for a Paramount Plus subscription as a podcast. We do pay for that, especially because during the strikes, I was like, "We're not getting free stuff from the studios. We are paying, we are watching, we're reviewing." And, like, I pay for the no commercial platform because we're trying to watch these streams and get you the reviews, and, yeah, they definitely still play a commercial at the top of every
yeah, and
episode.
I think I still have my own subscription,
Mhm.
and I'll tell you what I get really upset about is, again, as a parent, it's the appropriateness
Mm,
of the commercial, right?
mhm.
And so I'm like it, like, even as much as I want to sit and watch Lower Decks with my daughter, and for those of you parents out there who get to watch Lower Decks with your children, don't rub it in. Um
Soon, soon.
soon. But the idea that I'm going to turn this on and I'm going to get this horror thing that's going to scare the crap out of my
Oh,
11-year-old
yeah,
is
cemetery.
not. I'm like, really?
Um,
Really? I'm paying the premium and yet you're still doing that. That's the stuff that like I'm just like, wow, is it really? Is it? And again, we got to pay, I'm not saying we should not pay, right?
yeah,
Writers,
I want everyone to be
actors,
paid.
everyone needs to make a living. So I get that. But just it's yeah, I'm done. I'm
Yeah.
done because I'm gonna
Soapbox.
say some things that people are gonna get upset about. So I'm done.
We'll come down off the soapbox for now. We'll have a special patron episode that's just called the Soapbox Moment with Clyde.
Yes. Yes.
And we will put that up. But getting back into it, I did want to point out a couple of fun little Easter eggies that I noticed. So during like Locarno's speech, we kind of cut in to see a few people reacting to it. One of which was Petra, our other archaeologist friend from a couple seasons ago for Mariner. We also got a couple of new to me, at least, Ferengi rules of acquisition. They may have come up other times, but your boss is only worth what he pays you. And then shoot first, count profits later. I found very funny.
Yes.
um,
I was like, that seems new. I don't know that I knew
yeah,
that one.
I didn't feel. I was like, this feels like a lower decks Ferengi rule.
Yes.
And then the ship that Mariner takes from the Nova base was a steam runner class, and it was the USS Passero, which is named in honor of the Star Trek artist Fabio Passero, who passed away in 2022. We do love to dedicate our ships to people who've worked on Star Trek, and I really love that. Let's see. There was a steam runner ship was also in season 3 of Picard. So they've been around. They were in First Contact and Voyager. And then all the Binar jokes I also thought were very funny. I'm trying to think if there was anything else that I really noticed. Yeah, I just thought it was really solid. I thought all of the space battle sequences looked great. What were your thoughts? I know you love a space battle, Clyde.
I mean, I do love a space battle. I thought the space battles were fantastic and diverse, right? So you're
Mm-hmm.
getting Mariner fighting with a number of other ships and different strategies. Yeah, it was just kind of clever, and I enjoyed it from beginning to end, from all the way from escaping and hiding into the nebula to the explosion of the Genesis device, which
Mm-hmm.
to me, if you're gonna introduce a Genesis device,
You have to make it explode.
you have to make it explode. Like if you have one of those, it'd be such a disappointment not to have terraformed a planet. Like it's like, oh, we're gonna get a new planet. Like,
Yeah.
yes, you have to.
It's going to happen. To Chupi's point, I also thought they said when they threw the Orion ship, I thought it was amazing. I did think that was a really cool maneuver that we got to see Boimler kind of handle. And then we finally got to see them use the captain's yacht.
So that's what I'm talking about. When I was that was one of the moments I'm talking about before, and I'm like, you're making this reference that
Mhm.
that it's funny to us Trekkies,
Yeah.
because we've got all these you've got all these like series. And listen, okay, I'm gonna out myself again as a nerd. I have,
What?
yes, looked at schematics of different ships
Mhm.
and thought about, oh, here's where the captain's yacht is, and had full on like conversations in my head with myself about when you would use a captain's yacht and what the purpose of a captain's yacht is.
Now
And
we
in
see.
true, we've never seen it really used. I think there are a
Mhm.
couple times where people have gone to it and been
They've
in
never
it
worn it.
and hide in it,
Yeah.
right? It's like a place to hide, place to hang out. I'm guessing on a ship, it's a place where if you want to sneak away with your partner, that might be a place to get in trouble. It's so seldomly used. No one saw it coming.
Mhm.
Like,
I know.
like
I fully just thought they were on the ship that they were ramming and that they just
right.
needed to ram through it and then they were going to do something else. But very smart.
No one saw that. Like, I'm like, where are they? Like, oh, I thought they must be on the ship. And then when it was like, it's like, oh, they're on the captain's yacht. Like, what? I was like, what is that? A shuttle? And they were like, "Oh, we get to use finally get to use the captain jets," and I was like, "Get out of here! Like,
Mhm.
you got to be kidding me!" It's a great movie. So yeah, I did enjoy the battle.
Yeah, the battles look great. I loved all this. The sound design was also really strong. I love when the ships come out of being invisible, the woo, woo, woo sound. I don't know why. I just find it very satisfying. Um, and I thought they did a great job of like making the space battles be really exciting and fun to watch, but still feel like we were in the world of Lower Decks, right? Because
Mhm.
I think it could be really easy to over animate to make, because like essentially they're doing the same special effects that we watch in our regular Trek shows. It's just different textures, you know.
Yeah, but
Um,
it's but to your point, there's something about being in this animated cartoon world that I mean, it's gonna sound weird, but it's kind of comforting,
mhm.
right? Like it allows you to enjoy it without taking any of it really on. Where when this happens, when you see this kind of happen in like Discovery, I don't know, it's something about it that makes it feels like, oh, this is almost like really happening.
Yeah, I think
And
it's
it,
also
yeah.
like just, and I think Discovery looks incredible, but it is, I think, a difference between it feels a little more TOS-y in the way that it's colorful, it's not
Mhm.
as dark, right? Because it doesn't have to be realistic. Like space is dark. There's not a lot of points
Mhm.
of light in there. So it's
Right.
like I understand when we are in things like Strange New Worlds and Discovery, like a lot of the scenes, especially the space battles, are going to be darker. They're going to be grungier. They're going to be grittier, especially in like our more horror episodes of Strange New Worlds. And then like Disco is a drama. It is a space opera. So we kind of have to exist, I think, more in those realities of trauma. Whereas when a cartoon dies, it doesn't sting as much because it's still a colorful cartoon, right?
Yeah, and you're right. Like in a cartoon world, like there's light from every angle,
Yeah.
right? Like everything's in full color.
Mhm.
And which to me is fantastic because if I feel like I get to see more,
Mhm. Yeah.
right? Like I get to see the details more. That it's easier to see things in the background
Mhm.
when it's full light. So you notice people and expressions and stuff going on in the background. Where in Discovery, it's easy to miss someone sitting back there because they're not well lit.
Yeah, or not in focus, right? And I
Right.
mean, and part of it too is like those because it is a comedy, like they're playing with the facial expressions and like all of those
Mhm.
small things that are happening. It's like every time I watch a Lower Decks episode, I'm finding a new thing I didn't notice before. So I think they do a great job. I did think Mariner's like it's just so white when they're walking through the spaceship, and he's like, none of that carpet and wood paneling in here. Again, they find those things that we all kind of make fun of and think are kind of silly,
Yeah.
and they make fun of them in the most lovely of ways. Yeah, I'm excited for season 5. I truly can't wait. Lower Decks is become, I think, one of my favorite current I mean, it might just be one of my favorite Trek shows, period. Not even putting a date on it. I think they've really knocked it out of the park. I really enjoy our little crew of lower deckers and our upper deckers. Um,
To me, it has always been a wonderful compliment,
mhm.
right? Like I could not imagine watching this show without having seen the others,
Mhm.
right? Whereas Discovery and even Strange New Worlds a bit feels like you could jump in and watch those shows
Mhm.
having never watched Star Trek.
Yeah.
This show is truly like, hey, if you're a fan of Trek, this is for you. Like this is like you're gonna get this, you're gonna feel at home. Like
Yeah.
every week there's gonna be something for you that makes you smile, in addition to we're creating new stories. So that's why this is special for me.
Yeah. And I think, they do, it's hard for me to say. I'll have to ask some of my friends who haven't watched a lot of, 90s Trek. Because there are still those like laugh lines that have nothing to do with the references. You know what I mean? Like the jokes are very strong the whole way through, even if you are a Trek fan or someone who's new to Trek. So I think they do a great job of balancing that. Um, I think that was it for me. I'm excited for the next season. I'm sad this is over. I know we'll be hopping back on here to talk with Paul and get his reactions. I'll post that video for y'all this weekend so you can watch along with Paul and see what his thoughts and feelings were. I do want to plug again. I thought the Ready Room this week was really lovely, especially because Jerry O'Connell and Will Wheaton have some really nice moments connecting with each other. About like when Jerry got the call that he was going to be in Star Trek, he said the first person he knew he had to let know was Will. And I thought that was very sweet. And then Don Lewis said the first person she let know was Nichelle Nichols. So, and you're like, dang.
I mean, yeah, royalty. Like name drop. Well, you know, when you're Jaleesa, though, you could do that. Yes. Like you've been around game for a long time. Yeah, but you know, I just want to say, you know, you mentioned Will Wheaton. I feel like that was such a great moment because I think people have been asking. I've seen people ask in the chat. I've seen people ask kind of on our Slack channel for our Patreon. They're like, I wonder if Will Wheaton's going to come back. I wonder if they're going to bring in Will Wheaton. And you know, they also brought in Shannon Phil, who voiced Ceto and played Ceto. Like there are these moments that where you're like, man, that's pretty special, right? You know, not to mention, you know, the Tom Paris, Lick Nacarno. Like, I feel like in a world where so often it's easy to bring in somebody who sounds like those people.
It's lovely that they're actually getting all of these original actors to revoice these characters. Yeah.
Like that feels special. And that feels like whatever you had to do to bring them back in, it was worth it. As a fan of the show, it felt like, man, that's special, right? And Will Wheaton, I feel like you want to say it's easy, but not necessarily. Like he does a lot of Trek stuff, but for him to reprise the role of Wesley Crusher,
it's a lot for him.
It is. And Will, like I doubt you're listening to our little podcast. I think you have like 17 of your own, but if you are, thank you. You know, he's like, Will, you better call me Mr. Wheaton. Seriously though. No, thank you. I appreciate that for what it's worth. It meant something to, as a fan, as someone who watches and loves the show. It just, I thought that was special.
Yeah, it was nice. It was nice to see them back on a screen in some way and in a way that they were comfortable with. And it's, I was like, the animated stuff makes it so much easier to get some of these legacy characters in because you don't have to sit them in makeup forever. You don't have to de-age anything. Like it's fun. Takako, yeah, I love that Will's voice broke. I thought that was like a very funny little moment to be like, I'm back in being a teenager, even though I am very much a man.
Yes.
It was great. I really enjoyed it. Okay, y'all, we will be back next week. We'll be discussing the entirety of this season of Lower Decks. So make sure you put your messages in the menagerie. If you're one of our patrons, what did you think of this whole season? What were some of your favorite episodes? We'll dive into all of that next week when we are back with Paul. I can't wait to talk about it all again. You can subscribe, rate, and review on Apple and Spotify, as well as here on YouTube. If you're watching us, visit StarTrekPod.co for links to everywhere you can find or listen or watch the podcast, as well as to our Patreon. Also down below, there's links to merch. If you want one of our sweet, sweet peanut hamper shirts or a hot Frake shirt, they're there. You can also get them as mugs, koozies, all kinds of fun things. Clyde, where can people also find us on the internet?
You find us at Star Trek Pod on X, Twitter thingy, as long as we're there. Shout out to Karen who runs our Twitter. Happy birthday.
Happy birthday.
And yeah, and you know, who knows, if you're one of our patrons, if you want to join our Patreon, now's a great time. Great time. We might even do some watch alongs of Lower Decks before we do the season finale wrap up. So who knows?
Let's do it. Okay, we will talk to you all soon again. Live long and prosper. Bye-bye.